In this module, to minimize cost through internal controls, we're going to talk about monitoring. And just a reminder on best practices guidelines, they are what we would like to see as what is in place in the best possible situation. So we're going to talk about some items that we think that you should do, and we're going to try to explain them so that you can implement them with your board. In order to do these building-specific monitoring controls, which are generally in excess of what the property manager has in store, you need a couple of things, and a couple of things can happen. So one is you need at least one person, if not several members of the board, to be involved to personalize them for what's needed in your building. This is vital, especially the more people, the better, that these will continue on. Because we find that these may be lost for a change in the board or a property manager, and that would be a shame for you're investing your time and energy here for them just to be lost for a change by one of those. Also, they should always be memorialized in written form. The best is in a policies and procedures type document. And as far as the building staff, the other item that should be created are schedules of maintenance and repair, and also checklists to be sure that those are accomplished. These are very important documents to assure that all your work in monitoring moves forward long after you be involved with the board. So, and I want you to realize that utilization of these protects from us varying from our building objectives, which is to run the building for the best possible benefit and to keep maintenance charges down. So under monitoring, what we're trying to do is safeguard that appropriate prices are paid and that work is completed, that the supplies that we pay for are delivered and received, and that they are used for the building. And generally in monitoring, we focus on financial results, and there are going to be certain areas that are involved. The most important many times is the monitoring of managements. So this would mean that you should review the monthly management report that comes from the property manager. And we'll talk more about the monitoring the financial results and looking at the report. In the package, you should make sure that it includes a list of adjustments or journal entries, a bank reconciliation, as well as copies of the bank statements. This is important for you to make sure that the records that you're receiving mirror what's actually in the bank and what actually occurred. Because there are times where the bank reconciliations don't reconcile and the amount of the cash that the building believes they have is not accurate. Also, you should make sure that at least one member of the board always is a signatory on all bank accounts to maintain that you have access, because the banks will only work with signatories if there's any kind of conflict with the managing agent for some other reason. So you want to make sure that one of your board members is always a signatory, and if that person leaves, that their name is updated with a new board member as a signatory. Monitoring is really important for capital projects. You want to make sure that the work is done. Generally, an engineer is hired who supervises the work and makes sure it gets done. You potentially could have a construction manager from the property management firm also involved. The important thing is to make sure that there's no extra payments on the contract and that the amounts in total tie out to what should have been paid. There are some concerns we have on emergency work. One thing is that you should make sure that if it's deemed that it went through special controls because it was an emergency, i.e. we couldn't wait to get more than 3 bids, we had to get the work done on the weekend and couldn't get board approval, those items, you should make sure that those are always emergencies after the fact to verify that they were emergencies. And also double check that reasonable prices were paid and that the quality was acceptable for the work that was done. These are items where there have been breakdowns detected in internal controls. And we find that cash is one of our most vulnerable and important assets that needs to be maintained. So, as I mentioned, in order to be able to rely on your reports, there needs to be an evaluation of the bank reconciliation and a verification of the cash in the bank statements on a periodic basis. This is really imperative to make sure that you safeguard your cash. As far as monitoring staff, they generally are done by the managing agent, but yet these managing agents are busy, so that things like the amount of overtime that they run up is a way that you can save money, and asking very simple questions as to why it was necessary that there was overtime, how come we couldn't fill this, that overtime rates didn't need to be paid. Also, to keep an eye on the extent of supplies purchases, because a lot of the products that a building uses for its running, an employee can use for their own business or in their own home. So we need to be careful that the supplies are only being used for the building. And another thing for building staff is that there be an annual review, and that those reviews are documented and maintained and objectives required. So many times there is not that system in place to be sure that people know that they're being watched and that they're being checked on, and we're verifying it on at least an annual basis. So I just want to return real fast to the financial results. When you get the monthly reports, you should question any items which don't make sense to you. This is just common sense questions. You should not feel inhibited in asking a question that you should know something that you don't. And don't let anybody ever tell you that you should have known that. You should look at the expenses that they are reasonable. You should verify on the budget comparison expenses that are over budget as well as under budget. Over budget could mean that duplicate bills are being paid, or we're going to be over budget and have a loss for the year. Under budget could mean that the bills are not being paid and they really exist, but they just are not in the accounting system. That does happen. You want to make sure that non-emergency expenses over an established amount have an approval process, and that happens. You want to look at non-recurring expenses. Those are areas that are vulnerable. And as far as monitoring, one of the greatest things that's available for some of the larger properties is to do an actual control self-assessment. We have a separate video on control self-assessment that's available. Control self-assessment allows all the parties to get together and create a control system that works best for that specific property, and to help the building receive the benefits and get all the objectives met that they had wished to with the control structure.